We did an overview, didn't we? Pretty much an overview, didn't we?
We were talking about how to help your loved ones at death, especially seeing if you can give them some private moments, especially in a private home or in the hospital, to them to leave the.
Yeah, okay. So what we were doing, I was trying to show. Last week. I tried to show the most important point, the essence of the entire Rinpoche's advice. The entire advice is about how to die well, which means peacefully and virtuously, because that is at the time, very precisely. So I think what we'll do today is go through this death process, these 8 stages, because at that time, it's like a technical point. It's at that time when the karmic seed is triggered from the billions of karmic seeds that we're carrying around in our bank vaults, in our mind, that is the one that will determine your next life. This is the simple logic, you know. As Lama Zopa says, if you're going to help anybody in this life when they need you most, for this very reason, is at the time of death. And of course, it's completely not the point in the West, because at the time of death, as you're finished, it's almost like, you know, it doesn't matter anymore. But this is the exact opposite for the Buddhist teaching. And this is especially stressed in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is the Vajrayana, which is where these really detailed explanations exist, you know. So let's go through then that's 8 stages of death. I'll do it very roughly. It's in your course notes. It's in that book. Where are we? Yeah. See if I can get it open. I'll just go through. I'll remember it. Hang on. Death. Death. Here we go. Let's go through it. And then we can continue tomorrow if you want. You people, it's up to you to decide if you're all available. I'm more than happy to do that, because we won't get our full 90 minutes today, that's for sure. Hang on a second. Okay, so okay. Where is it? So the stages of death, intermediate state and rebirth, the 8 stages. So yeah, okay, page 47. We'll go through this one. 47. Okay. So basically, like I've been talking many times, and you've heard this over the years in various teachings, according to the Vajrayana, we've got gross consciousness, which is basically our sensory consciousness. And of course, that's inextricably linked with our gross body, which is this bag of bones we walk around in, you know. And then, of course, we have, I mean, in this gross level, we do have access to the subtle mind, which is our conceptual mind, but at a fairly gross level. In other words, conceptuality is subtle, actually, as opposed to gross. But it's, in other words, it's a much subtler than we think. There are subtler levels of our mental consciousness, much subtler levels of our conceptuality than we would imagine, you know. So, but we do have access to that, clearly. We can think and do things in this gross body. It's evident. But the death process, the first 4 stages, is the gradual deconstruction of the 4 elements. We're made up of the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, water. We've got the gross consciousness, we've got and then the sensory consciousness, the 4 parts of our mind that function through the medium of the eyeball, the ear, the so on and so forth. You know, the part of our mind, which is not physical, the sensory consciousnesses. So they gradually cease. The 4 elements and then the senses gradually cease in these first 4 stages. So roughly speaking, there's 8 stages, and roughly speaking, at least in the first 4, there are 5 things that occur, 5 things. So each of these stages is labeled, is named. This is traditionally because one does it as a meditation, in terms of a subtle kind of vision. They refer to it as a subtle vision that occurs at each of these stages. And so one of the ways to meditate is to imagine these stages and to imagine these visions. They actually occur every time we go to sleep, but I mean, we're not aware of it, you know. It's only the great yogis who can be conscious, literally, as you go through these stages, even of sleep. And it's a really brilliant practice to get ready for death, because it's exactly the same process that occurs, you know, but it's obviously more dramatic at the time of death. So as Lama Zopa says, you know, we all go through these 8 stages every time we go to sleep and every time we die. And with death, it can be slow, it can be, or it can be very quick. Like if you have a violent accident, usually it's extremely quick, but you still go through those 8 stages. It's a little bit like if you walk down 20 floors in a building, or you fall down the 20 floors. It's obviously quicker, but you have to go through the stages of the 20 floors. You understand what I'm saying? It's like that. So the first of these 8, there's no one here. I've got the entire bathroom to myself. This kind lady, don't tell, she said, they won't let me have it. I was going to have a meeting in here. Okay. The vision of a mirage, it's called. So basically there's 5 things that occur that cease to function at each of these first 4 stages. There's one of the aggregates, as they refer to. The aggregates is a teaching that Buddha gave in a sutra. It's a way he divides up the components of a person. This is part of the sutras. And so we're made up of 2 things, body and mind, but he breaks it up into 5 components. And the first one is called the aggregate of form, which is really the physical component, our physical components, you know. Then there's the second one is, and each of these 4 stages too, there's one of the things that ceases to function. It's all there in the list, you know. It's called one of these, they talk about these 5 wisdoms. And all it means is a particular way the mind works at this grosser level. And the Lama Zopa says they're related, they're mental consciousness, but it's related to the senses. And it takes a time to understand these things. So the first of these 5 wisdoms that ceases to function at the same time as the form aggregate they're called the mirror-like wisdom, which is the capacity to see many things at once. So, you know, when you're wide awake and wound up, like right now, you know, even though you're not looking around the room, you're conscious of many, many things all at once. Your mind is just sitting here, we're listening, but we can, I mean, there's 1,000 things appearing to us, and this mirror-like wisdom is what reflects those things. Well, that begins to cease at this point. Now, we all know this experience very well. When you're going to sleep, you really, you know, if I'm sitting there having a chat to Caroline, and she's chatting away, and I'm really tired. We have this experience. And first of all, I sort of, you feel like you're very vague and you can't hold much information. Well, you know, first of all, this mirror-like wisdom is beginning to cease, but also your form, which is similar to the earth element. So the other thing is one of the elements ceases. So here it's the earth element. And so your body becomes very heavy. You know, when you're tired, you're really heavy, you know. Your earth element begins to cease, and your eye consciousness begins to cease. So you know yourself, I'm sitting there looking at Caroline, struggling to stay awake, and I can't see that much. You really can't see. Your eyes are very kind of cloudy. You're beginning to sort of become unconscious, literally. So the other thing that occurs, so it's the aggregate of the form, the earth element, the body gets very heavy, you feel like you're sinking. Your eye consciousness, the mirror-like wisdom, and then the vision that occurs here is, they call it a mirage. So basically each of these first 4, I mean, think of a mirage is like an interplay of earth and water, isn't it? You know, so here there's like this vision of a mirage. And this happens every time we go to sleep, but we're not aware of it. That's why we have to practice, you know, because it happens, it's there, we're just not conscious. So then, and this is interesting, they say one of the signs of this is that you feel very heavy. You feel like you're sinking into the bed, you know. And I remember very vividly, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was in India, in Delhi, in the middle of the summer, boiling hot, so hot, and I was dying. Basically, I was dying. One Lama said I was close to death. I had malaria and hepatitis together. But the trouble is, all you could see was the hepatitis, because I was bright yellow. But I was having these hideous fevers. Usually with hepatitis, the fevers last a few days, but I had fevers like for 2 weeks. And one day someone saw me in one of these fevers, and I was living in a house where there was no air conditioning. It was like 45 degrees every day, centigrade, you know, it was like in Celsius. It was like, I was living in like this total hallucinated nightmare. I cannot believe how I was feeling. I have to have cold showers. I thought I'd burst into flames, you know. And then someone came to visit. I was in this place in Delhi every day. No one wanted to take care of me. I don't know what happened. I don't know why, but never mind. But someone saw me having a fever, and they realized I had malaria straight away. So they put me in a hospital. And then I knew I'd die if I didn't get out of India, right? So I remember my sister flew all the way to Singapore to pick me up halfway. So I got a flight with Air India. And I know I stayed in this hotel in Singapore. First of all, it had air conditioning. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, the gift of that air conditioning. It was like being in heaven. I can't even describe after that intense heat of Delhi, you know. And the other thing was, I felt that experience of sinking into the bed. Very vivid, you know. Clearly I didn't die. Here I am 40 years later, still alive and kicking. But it was a very vivid experience of the earth element ceasing to function, you know. So that's that. So that's the first stage. And this can happen very quickly, these 4 stages, or quite slowly. And if you're familiar with this, and this is what's important if you are helping people to die, your grandmother, your auntie, your dog, it's the same thing. You need to become familiar with this so you can start to see the signs of it so you know how to help. And of course, familiar for yourself too. The second stage is called the aggregate of feeling. So there's feeling is one of the many mental factors, one of the states of mind, like I call the mechanical parts of our mind. It's either pleasure, pain, or indifference. There's only 3 options. So at this point, because this is ceasing, you learn to somehow, you can't distinguish these experiences. They kind of merge, you know. The wisdom of equanimity comes and ceases, which is these somehow, this has a relationship to these, to this aggregate of feeling ceasing. I don't really understand this one at all. The wisdom of equanimity, I don't understand it. Then the water element ceases, so the liquids in your body begin to dry up. And this is what happens when you're tired, when you're asleep, isn't it? When you wake up in the morning, isn't it? You're very dry. Your mouth is dry, your eyes are dry, because the water element during your sleep had sort of temporarily, to some degree, kind of ceased functioning properly, you know. Then the ear consciousness goes. So there I am, listening, sitting upright, trying to stay awake, talking to Caroline, and I missed that last 20 seconds. We all have that experience because my ear consciousness starts to go. So if you keep going, I'll topple over and go to sleep. So your senses are already going even before you topple over. You know, we have these experiences, and this is what happens at death. The aggregate of feelings ceases at the second stage. This wisdom of equanimity, when the present, I think it's sort of pleasure, pain, and indifference kind of merge, become less clear, the difference between them. The wisdom of the water element ceases and the ear consciousness goes. And then there's this subtle vision, they say, of smoke, which really is like the interplay of the water element and the next one, which is fire. That kind of seems to be like steamy, a bit like a vision of steam, but they call it smoke. So at this point, the second of the stage, as you're moving towards the third one, it's about this point. This is the crucial stage where you've still got your wits about you. You can still, even though your ear is beginning to go, you can still hear things. People can still be giving you advice at this point, keeping you on track, keeping you from being fearful, saying the name of your Lama, reading practices, whatever it is, helping you stay stable. At this point is about when there's another whole process that occurs, and in another teaching we have to go through this. How many teachings do we have? 3, 4.
We have one more next
I know
Thursday.
we might have to add a couple more. Okay.
Yeah, actually, I asked for February 2nd. There's nothing in your calendar.
We'll have to. I know we'll have to work it out. What time? Yeah. I have to just watch the time. Please, let's just wait. I'm getting nervous. Wait just a minute.
Yeah, it's
2 minutes.
Swiss time. 30 minutes.
Hang on. Sorry, Peter. I'm very irresponsible. I know I am. Wrong one. Where's my boarding pass?
Don't miss it.
Oh, everybody. Where's my boarding pass? I gave it to the fellow. What did I do with it? Now the water's running all over my things. Oh. Where's my boarding pass? I have no idea. Let's have a look. Not there. I must have dropped it under my computer. No. I can't find my boarding pass. I have to get another. I think I have to go soon. I'm so sorry. I'm really very sorry.
No, it's fine.
No problem at all.
Okay, okay. So now,
I have mailed you a suggestion for a new date, February 2nd, and
yeah, we'll work it out. You have to email me, okay?
yes,
Email me.
I mailed
Okay.
you.
So I'll just do a couple more points, and then I think I've got to board it. Yeah, I've got to board in 10 minutes. Okay. I'll get a boarding pass first. Okay. So then, so this is the point between the second and the third, when you still got your wits about you, which is when it's crucial to be helping the person, because at this point, with the 12 links, there's another whole series process that occurs, and it's in the book, and this is from the sutras. This is occurring simultaneously. So at this point, the 8th and the 9th links, which are craving and grasping, they're really just levels of attachment. Now, they're functioning every second of our life, but they have a very specific role at the time of death. And so this grasping, as this process is happening, is a very, number 9, is a very powerful level of intense attachment, which is powerfully triggered at this point. And it's much more powerful in a normal daily life. And what it is because of the intensity of attachment to me, attachment to the body. It's apparently, Lama Zopa says, the main reason there is fear at death is because of this attachment, not to your husband, your money, to reputation, is to the body, this intense identification with our body. And this is what can be so distressing. And so when that grasping occurs, no matter what, but if you can help that person by being loving or saying prayers or hearing the prayers, and you can help them kind of stay steady, that grasping still occurs. But if the mind is being relatively virtuous and you're hearing virtuous things, that is then the point at which this triggers the number 2 link, which is the karmic seed that will determine your next birth. So the grasping is a catalyst for the link, number 2 link, which is the karmic seed that will determine your next rebirth. So if you're lying there, like most people who are dying, this is what's so tragic, freaking out in the old people's homes, out of their brains in drugs, in hospitals, not knowing what's going on. They've never looked at their minds. They have no view about impermanence. They don't have a view about anything. Fear is inevitable, and this is heartbreaking. And what that's going to do inevitably for most people is trigger a negative karmic seed, and then that causes them to go to the lower realms. So this is why this is the period, this piece is the period that is most important to help people. Whether it's the mouse, the moth, your grandmother, whether she's in a coma, it's the same thing is occurring. So this is the thing about one thing or more I'll say. Helping people in coma, for example, half asleep or unconscious. Mantra and prayers are the most powerful way to help, because that's linked to the subtle mind. Sound is more subtle than the visual. So, you can't show a person something when they're asleep, but if you say prayers and mantras, and there's so many, I've had so many experiences of people being in comas, but being conscious of mantra, So this is the thing that you can help most, saying mantras quietly for that dog, for the moth, for your grandma, quietly saying prayers and mantras, which can hook the Buddha to be there and help their mind be peaceful. And then that can help trigger a virtuous karmic seed. I mean, that's the essence. I think I have to leave it there. To think about, read about, look at the teachings. Please read about this and try and hear. It's like a technical point. All right, people, I'm so sorry to be so naughty. But it's about, okay, we had 15 minutes, I suppose, but still good quality. We talked good quality things. So work out a schedule for me last. I'm very happy to be available. I'll be in Santa Fe for 3 days, but I'm happy to teach tomorrow as well if you're ready, if you'd like it, some of you people. We'll work it out. Let me know.
Yes,
okay,
I will send you a mail. I will send you another mail. So
yeah, okay.
We'll figure it out.
1 o'clock New York time is 11 o'clock. No, tomorrow I can only give you 1 hour. I can only give you an hour tomorrow, but that's okay. I can give you 1 hour tomorrow at 11 o'clock Santa Fe time, which is 7 p.m. U. I can do that 1 hour tomorrow, okay? Maybe 1 hour and 15 minutes. So if you'd like to do that, we can finish tomorrow. We'll go through the process, and we can have other days after this, because it's a really important topic and I would really like talking about it. All right, people?
Thank you, Venerable.
Safe flight.
Thank you, everybody. Please read the teachings. So we can take this advice, so we can help ourselves die well, so we can help others die well, so we can make sure that we activate a virtuous karmic seed to get another decent human rebirth, so we can carry on our spiritual path. This is why death is so important, as Lama Zopa says. So that's it. We're ready to go. And we'll continue from yesterday. We got to about, we were discussing the first, I'll reiterate the points again. The first level is this vision of mirage, they call it, when these 5 things cease to function. So one of the aggregates, one of those wisdoms, one of the elements, and there's this particular vision that arises. So the earth element ceases, the body becomes heavy, the form aggregate ceases, the capacity, this wisdom, they call it mirror-like wisdom, this ability to hold a lot of information, like and the eye consciousness begins to cease. And the second one, your ear consciousness starts to go. And like I said, this is also what happens when we go to sleep. I use that example of talking to somebody. You had this experience and you're really tired and you just didn't hear the last 20 seconds, because all your energies are absorbing, going inwards. All the energies, the subtle winds and the states of mind connected to those winds are ceasing to function. And they're all moving out of the external, all the outer channels. We've got 72,000 channels, all into the central channel, the main channel that starts at your crown and goes down and ends at the penis for the male and the cervix for the female. All the winds are going into that channel. So the third stage, the nose consciousness ceases to function. This wisdom, it's the aggregate of recognition, they call it, which is this ability to distinguish between this and that. And the wisdom and so you're also, at this moment in time, you can no longer distinguish between friend, enemy, and stranger. You know, your worst enemy might be on the left of your bed and their beloved on the right, and you can't tell the difference. So you're gradually kind of losing the plot, gradually losing this ability that we take for granted when we're wide awake and wound up, you know. So the vision here is it's an interplay, you could say it's an interplay of, first of all, it's the mirage, the first one, interplay of earth and water. And then the second one is sort of like an interplay of water and fire. So it's a bit like sort of smoky. You could even say a bit steamy, really. And then you've got fire. Now the fire element, and this is sparks, kind of like sparks is the inner vision. And then the fourth one. So by this point already, this is the point I said, the 12 links of dependent arising, they function throughout our lives every second, but as Lama Zopa says, there's a chapter in the book about it. They have a very particular role at the time of death. So like I said yesterday, at the same time as about between the second and the third stages of these 8 stages, the 12 links are playing out at the same time. And at that time, this is a really crucial point, when you still got your wits about you. And then the 8th and 9th links, craving and grasping, they're just levels of attachment, that's all. And they're happening every second in daily life. But at a particular point here, this grasping kicks in, very intense grasping. And it's powerful attachment. It's very particular specific to death. And it's the most powerful attachment to this. Lama Zopa says the main reason we have fear at death is because of losing this. And this is the body, because we identify ourselves with our bodies, don't we? As far as we're concerned, I and body are the same, you know? So this powerful attachment, this powerful holding on, but also this grasping. So, you know, if you've trained your mind by practicing, and this is what's very interesting, Lama Zopa says at the time of death, this attachment can be used actually. So we know ourselves, attachment in general has many functions, but one of the functions of attachment is always hankering after is always trying to hold on to something, not let go of something, isn't it? So that's what's happening here very powerfully, this attachment to your body. And it brings enormous fear and just intense, literally holding on, you know. But another function of attachment, we know this, is always looking forward to something, always anticipating something. And this is how we spend our lives, holding on to what we have got, a fear of losing it, and then all the time thinking of something else and wanting that in the future. We know this. This is how we live our lives with attachment, you know, that brings so much misery. So Lama Zopa says, you know, that you can use this attachment. So let's say you're helping your grandmother die and she's very devoted to God. Well, she's got fear like everybody else, and she's worried and she's anxious. And that's why in one of these chapters, and we're going to go into this, one of the chapters of how to help your loved ones, one of the most powerful ways to help your loved ones is to tell them, is to talk about their good qualities, for example, is to praise them. I mean, we know ourselves. We never praise ourselves. We're always finding fault, always critical, or we're being arrogant. I'm so clever, or we're being self-hating. We very rarely actually rejoice in our good qualities. And so nor does your grandmother. And there she is lying there, dying slowly, and she's worried and anxious, her mind never stopping. So then just to sit there and praise your grandmother and thank her for being a good person and what a good life she has led, it's like nectar. We all know what it's like. It's so delicious to be praised. We're kind of hungry for it, and it's good to hear it. So it's really important if you're doing this with your loved one, let's say your grandma. That's one thing I'm saying, one thing incidentally. But the crucial piece here about using attachment means, you know, if she's got faith in God, let's say she's got faith in God. So, you know, one of the things also you can talk about is heaven and God. Talk about how God loves her. Talk about how heaven is so wonderful. And then you can tell her to look forward to heaven. She, you know, basically at the time of death, you're kind of waiting for death to happen. And that itself just sounds fearful. We don't quite know what that means. We can't kind of articulate it. We can't kind of, it just seems fearful, death, you know, this vague kind of ending. And also, like, especially if you're a materialist, you've got nothing to look forward to except a black hole. So of course it brings fear. So one of the practical ways of utilizing your attachment, let's say your loved one, you know, your grandma's, you know, loves God, is talk about God, how God loves her, and to look forward to heaven. So instead of sitting there, lying there anxious, worrying about this mystical thing called death, look forward to what's going to come. And that can relax your mind and open your mind and make you very spacious and relaxed. This is a really powerful point. So clearly, if you're a Buddhist, you're looking forward to a future rebirth, or you're looking forward to a Pure Land. And we're going to go into this, you know. I know when I was doing this book, this is years ago, and it wasn't yet published, it was before, while I was working on it. And I thought the manuscript was kind of finished, but I knew there was still more to go, and there was nothing in it about the Pure Lands. And I never thought about the Pure Lands much myself. And I kind of always thought about, when I'd hear about Amitabha's Pure Land, and a particular people really like Amitabha's Pure Land. And to me, it just sounded like being a Christian and going to heaven. And I thought, oh, I don't want that. I want to be born a human again. And then I know when I was working on this book, I got a note. This is soon after Lama Zopa Rinpoche started to teach. His stroke was in 2011, and then he gave this teaching in 2012 in San Jose in California on Amitabha. And Venerable Holly, one of the attendants, she sent me this brief kind of summary of the things that he talked about and the benefits of going to Amitabha's Pure Land. And I'd never thought of this before. And suddenly I was very happy to put this new chapter in. But for myself, it was quite helpful because it was something I'd never thought about before. And so, you know, basically, if you think about it, we're going to go into this more in detail. I want to go through the 8 stages. But at this point, is what I'm getting at, one of the things that you can help your loved one, or you yourself in everyday life, you can be doing this. Instead of just thinking, I'm getting ready for death, I'm getting ready for death, one day closer to death. It's true, but why not say one day closer to Amitabha's Pure Land, or one day closer to my next new little delicious human rebirth? I mean, it's a way of thinking, and it's quite sensible. It's because death, I mean, when you analyze it, it's the label we give to this general process that occurs, which in the Buddhist terms means the consciousness leaving this body, going to the intermediate state and taking another body. So it's kind of quite complicated. But if you just think of it as an event, you can't think of death as an event. It's quite difficult because you're not conscious of it when it happens. But you can think of a Pure Land, and you can think of a human rebirth, and your grandmother who loves God can think of heaven. So it opens your mind, relaxes you, and makes you think of something virtuous. So as Lama Zopa says, you can use attachment in that way. Initially, it's surprising because we hear that attachment is negative, but it's helpful. You can use it skillfully, you know, and it relaxes the person's mind. So now for myself, since this hearing about Amitabha's Pure Land, we're going to discuss this later, I've decided that that's my goal. Lama Zopa says one of the causes of going to Amitabha's Pure Land is to want to go there. Now that's really logical. It's obvious. This is karma, intention. If I want an ice cream, the obvious first cause of getting an ice cream is wanting an ice cream. It's sort of so obvious, but we just don't think about it. If you don't ever have the thought, I want an ice cream, you will never stand up to go to get one. So intention, this is the real meaning of karma. And it happens every millisecond. One of those crucial parts of our mind, not a virtue, not a non-virtue, but one of the, as I call the mechanical parts of our mind, that's happening every millisecond. It's really the actual meaning of karma, but it's mental. It's mental. Intention is the first step. Then your body and speech will carry out the wishes along with all the other pieces of the mind all working together to have an experience, you know. So intention is incredibly important. So as Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, I want, or the thought may this, may that. And so you utilize this, you know. So then I know for myself, I've just made a decision, you know, you got to want. So you've got 2 choices, basically. As a Buddhist, you've got 2 choices. Okay, you don't want to go to a lower realm, so you don't want that as a choice. But the choices that you do want are either a human rebirth, so you can carry on your spiritual path and then get enlightened, or Amitabha's Pure Land. So we'll go into this later, but I'll just say it here. There are many Pure Lands, and I'll explain what they are, but they're basically the abode of all the Buddhas, but at a subtler level. It's not a level that we can see with our eyes and hear with our ears. You know, only your mental consciousness, your subtle mental consciousness can cognize such phenomena. But basically all the Buddhas manifest in this form at a subtle level, and they all have an environment in which they manifest, you know. That's called their Pure Land. So the only one, Lama Zopa says in this chapter, and again, I will talk about it later, is that the only one that's available to regular people who don't have high realizations is Amitabha's Pure Land, and he discusses it in this chapter, you know. So then for me, I made the decision, I'm gonna aim to get to Amitabha's Pure Land. So when I go to sleep, when I hit the pillow, I press the button on my iPad or my iPhone, and I said my prayers in my own voice. I recite the prayers. So I play me reciting this prayer of Tsongkhapa's of the wish to go to Amitabha's Pure Land as the last thing I hear as I go to sleep. So I figure, you know, I'll try my best. And if I miss Amitabha's Pure Land, then hopefully I'll get a human rebirth. And if I miss that, then I'm in trouble. So you've only got two options. We've got to think about these things like this, be specific, because why we have so much fear also is about anything is because we don't want to think about it. And that just brings terrible fear. So the more you analyze all these stages, the more you know all these steps, the more you know the details, the less fear you'll have and the more in control you will be, you know. So that's that piece. We'll go into Amitabha's Pure Land later. So back to the stages. So the second, and between about the second and third, so this is where Pabongka Rinpoche, Lama Zopa quotes Pabongka Rinpoche. As Pabongka Rinpoche says in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, your dying thoughts activate the karma that will be the cause of your next rebirth. And the activators of this throwing karma, that's what they call it, it throws you into the next life, are the 8th and 9th links, craving and grasping. Rinpoche says that this takes place while the mind is still active and you can still recall virtue or be reminded of it by other people. And that's about this, between the second and third stages of the 8 stages, by which point your earth element has ceased, your eye element, your eye conscious starting to go, your ear conscious starting to go. You still got your wits about you. Your fire element, these ones, the earth and the water elements have gone. So he says at this point, it's so important to be able to control the arising of the disturbing thoughts by remembering the guru, the teachings, renunciation of samsara, karma, emptiness, loving kindness, great compassion, and the rest, which gives us the chance to be born in a Buddha's Pure Land or to take a perfect human rebirth. Rinpoche is saying this, Lama Zopa. If our last gross thoughts are virtuous, the throwing karma will be virtuous. If the last gross thoughts are non-virtuous, the throwing karma will be non-virtuous. The karmic seed that ripens is whichever is heavier, more strongly habitual, which, as I mentioned earlier, could have been planted hundreds, even millions of lifetimes ago. If they're equal, the seed that was planted first will be the one that ripens. So if we die with anger, say, or strong attachment to our life, our loved ones, and so on, our birth will only be in the lower realms, nowhere else. And this is the thing that's, again, difficult for us to hear, because it kind of sounds heavy, you know, but that's just the way the mind is. We do it. No one's doing it to us. And that's why understanding this death process, knowing it's not necessarily a comfortable thing for ordinary people, why it's so important to help your animals and your loved ones die peacefully, being there with them, like literally helping them through this process. Because, you know, for example, if it's your dog, I mean, dogs are so attached to their owners, aren't they? So that attachment you can use. So if your doggy is sick, you know, in pain, if they feel secure, you're there and you make them feel secure, their suffering will be less. That's something we really got to think about. When we talk about the suffering at the time of death, and we see animals suffering, it freaks us out to think that they will die with suffering, and the same with our grandmother. And this is why we want to kill them. You know, we politely call it euthanasia. So the thing is that when we really understand this, and I think from our own experience, we know this, if you're sick, you've got the physical pain, but you've also got the mental anguish. And if you've got a person who loves you, is taking care of you and nurturing you, somehow you don't feel as bad. And that's with animals for certain. When your doggy is there and you're loving it and the dog is secure and comfortable and safe and you're playing mantras to your dog just feels a lot better, even though their pain is bad, you know, and because it's fear that causes people so much suffering. But we have to see there's a difference. There's the mental and the physical. So this is the same with your grandmother or your friends. You know yourself. I always think of this when something bad happens to you, you get sick or some terrible accident, the first thing we do is think of somebody, or you even call out for somebody. We know that. So if you'd have nobody to call out to, nobody to rely upon, no one to think about, no wonder there's fear and suffering for human beings. So then to be this person, to be there to help. I mean, I always remember it was such a funny experience. But a couple of years ago, only 3 or 4 years ago in Kopan, when I was staying there before one of our pilgrimages, and I was going down, I was about 99, I know it was about 99 steps. I know I counted one time because I was just, any whatever reason, it was like 100 steps down to my room, which is next to Annie Fran. If you've been to Kopan, you know Annie Fran. She's my friend. She's a German nun. So I was going down to see Annie Fran, and I fell. I just, not very far, but I fell very heavily and hurt my back. Now, the first thing I did was shout out, Fran. That's what we do because we need to rely upon somebody. You know, I'll never forget this one. You listen to this one. I find this so mind-blowing. When you're a little girl and you're lucky enough to have a nice mother, a nice mummy to rely upon, you know, when something bad happens, look at what kids do. The first thing you do is when my sister hurt me, Jan was mean to me, let's say, I would make a beeline for my mother. Mommy, Janet was mean to me. We do that because we need to rely upon somebody to hold our emotions, to help us with our fears and our pain. So that's why it's so important to be there for that person, your dog, whatever, just to be there like a rock of Gibraltar for them. This is a powerful way to help people. So, and this is what I find most fascinating. There you are thinking the whole world is collapsing because your mean sister was horrible to you, and you're crying and looking like so shocked. And you know what? You listen to this I find so powerful. What does your mother do? She says, oh, darling, it's all right. It's okay. And you believe her and you stop suffering. So just because she's holding you emotionally and she's letting you know that everything's fine, nothing's changed, but your mother's confidence makes you relaxed. That's how you help people. You be there for them. You don't have to be like something special. You just be there to be loving and kind, you know. So I always think about people in old people's homes who are dying or in hospitals, who've got no family. The distress is so sad, you know. And I even think just the cleaning lady can be the one who can be so kind, just to give them a loving word, to smile at them. Because we need love and affection. We need support because we don't know how to support ourselves. This is how we help people. It's so simple in some way and really quite profound. And particularly at this point is because when all the fear rises, and if someone's there helping you through it, your mind can be calm. And that's what's needed when this grasping rises, you know. And so if you're a Buddhist, you have your sister, you're somebody saying your prayers to you, talking about your guru, or you listen to your guru's voice. You have something that you can emotionally hold on to that keeps you steady. It's so unbelievably important, you know. But listen to understand the logic of it, the details of it, you know. So we want our pussycat, our dog, our grandma at this point to be virtuous, to be peaceful, because that is the catalyst for triggering one of the millions of karmic seeds that we've got in our mind. And the cause of it, the overt one is the grasping. That's the energy that triggers the ripening or the activating of that karmic seed. But the quality of the karmic seed is determined by whether you're peaceful or virtuous. Even though the grasping is there, you can still be kind of trying to be virtuous, you know. So it's a really important point. Rinpoche describes all this in the book. So the next one is the third stage, which is the vision, the aggregate of discrimination, this ability to distinguish between this and that every second. This starts to go, and you no longer can recognize your friends, your enemies, and your strangers, you know. And the wisdom of discriminating awareness, the same thing, also ceases. You can't remember people's names, and the people around you become kind of blurs, you know. The fire element dissolves. The body's heat gradually ceases. Your nose sense ceases. And then there's this subtle energy, a subtle vision of like fire sparks, you know. Like I said, these visions, so-called, they occur every time we go to sleep, but we're just not conscious. We're not aware, you know. Now the heat leaves the body. How the heat leaves the body. This is interesting. Lama Zopa says you can judge the type of rebirth the person will take by where the heat in your body begins to dissolve. If you're dying with a positive attitude, with virtuous thoughts, which causes a happy rebirth, your feet will get cold first. And the heat will eventually be only at the heart. So in other words, the energy goes down from the head, up from the feet, and everything gathers at the heart chakra. That's the last place where all the energy is, right? Because you see, we've got these 72,000 subtle channels. And gradually, this is what happens when you go to sleep, you know, gradually all the wind energies and the different states of mind connected to those wind energies go from the side channels and all enter into the central channel. That's when you're unconscious. And now gradually the energy goes from the crown down to the heart and from the feet up to the heart. So if a virtuous state of mind has been triggered already and the heat is leaving your body, then your feet will get cold first and your head will stay nice and toasty. That's a good sign. Now, the other way, if your head gets cold first and your feet are all toasty, you're in trouble. That's an indication that a negative seed has been triggered. I mean, I don't know what you can do about it at that point. I don't know, but just saying. The fourth stage, by this point, your earth has gone, your water, your fire. Now the air ceases, the breath goes out and doesn't go in. Your eye consciousness is gone, your ear consciousness, your nose consciousness, and now your tactile consciousness at this fourth stage, your tactile and your tongue consciousness cease. You're all accomplishing, or the completion wisdoms dissolves. And even if you could hear a name, you would not remember its meaning. In our daily life, we normally remember the meaning of something, and then we act on it. Now you can't think of the meaning of anything. And also you don't even know who you are yourself. You no longer have a sense of who you are. Your air ceases, the breathing goes out, the tongue sense base dissolves, your tongue becomes short and thick and turns blue at the root. And I always remember this, I always quote this, Geshe Rabten, one of Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe's teachers, one of my teachers too. He said, that tongue that has spent its life gossiping is now useless. Oh, that's great. I love that. So that at this point, your body, the tactile consciousness ceases, and the inner, and then now, and finally there's a vision of a flame. Like the Lama Zopa says, it's like, actually, according to Song Rinpoche, it's more like the light surrounding a flame, a dim red-blue light. This is a sign. So all of these are available. These are the yogis who are really practiced through these stages in their meditation, can be aware at each stage. They recognize these signs, you know. And that's what we at least can do a meditation. It's in this book. You can go through imagining each of these stages so that when you do die, you might even be able to be aware of them, you know, so you know what's going on. So now the outer breath and the five senses have stopped. So the outer breath, which means this gross air, has ceased, and your gross consciousness, the senses, have now ceased. So of course, as we think now in the modern world, we think you're now dead, and you're not dead yet, because you've got your subtle consciousness and your very subtle consciousness still there. So now the next vision, the next one is called the white vision. There's lots of other things that are going on. I'm just keeping it simple, okay? So now you've got this subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels. It's got the central channel that goes from your crown, which is just in front of you, the crown chakra. You've got the channels, then you've got these so-called chakras, which means wheel, but it's basically then you've got, before the chakras, you've got 2 side channels that go up from the nose and then go to the top and then go down alongside the central channel. And those 3 channels end at the penis for the male and the cervix for the female. So by this point, all the airs, all the grosser level have all absorbed into the central channel. So now, so the chakras are like a coming together of various of these other channels, like a big all knotted together, blocking entry into the central channel. Because all the energies eventually have to go into the central channel, into the heart chakra, the very subtle. That's when you get to the subtlest level of your conscious being. That's what happens when you go to sleep. This is what happens when you die. And we have to learn to practice this. The great yogis can do this, you know. So the 5th stage, many things happen, but I'll keep it simple. So the wind energies in the right and left channels move up now and open the head chakra, loosening the knots there, and then the airs, along with the states of mind connected, enter into the central channel. This causes now this, they call it the white bodhicitta or the white kundalini. It's like it's a subtle liquid energy that came from the father. Okay, so at the time of conception, in our mother's fallopian tube, I suppose, what happens is there's the gross egg and sperm from the mother and father, but connected to these is this subtle white liquid energy that's called the white kundalini, and the red one from the mother is the red kundalini. There's a subtle level. We don't discuss these in the modern world. When you're very subtle, when your consciousness leaves the body, goes to the intermediate state, we'll describe this, and then when your new mummy and daddy hop into bed to have sex, or wherever they hop, your consciousness runs there and joins that egg and sperm, but your consciousness actually conjoins with this red and white kundalini, and then that's the beginning of the growth of you at that point. And so this red kundalini, the white kundalini, mainly resides as, like they call it, an indestructible drop at your heart chakra. That's where you begin to develop from in the womb. And that stays there all your life in your heart chakra. So another aspect of this white kundalini is that it's in the different channels, but Lama Zopa says it predominates at the brow chakra, at the crown chakra. So at this point, this white kundalini or white bodhicitta melts and flows down the central channel to the heart chakra. So then now you experience the white vision, the mind of white appearance, like very bright moonlight in autumn, or like the almost white sky caused by the light of the rising moon when everything is covered with snow. Whereas the previous, anyway, never mind that, so it's okay, it's quiet. So then the next one is, and the mind is getting ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. All the different levels of our mental consciousness are ceasing to function, ceasing to function, ceasing to function. The next one is the red vision. And the winds in the right and left channels now move down and open the sex and navel chakras. You've got these chakras at the crown, brow, throat, heart, navel, below the navel, and then 3 at the end on the external for the male and internal for the female. So this causes the red bodhicitta. So this wind in the right and left channel move down and open the sex and navel chakras, loosening the knots there, and then that energy moves, the winds enter into the central channel. This causes the red bodhicitta or the red kundalini, which predominates at the navel. So the white kundalini is the source of the capacity of the human body to experience joy, and the red kundalini is the basis of the capacity of the human mind, the person, to experience heat, and also plays a function in your digestion and the heat in the body, right? So this red bodhicitta now, this shoots up the central channel to the heart chakra, and now it joins with the white one and surrounds this indestructible drop, which you got from your mother and your father, which has been residing at your heart chakra all your life.
where you started at the time of conception, where you began developing in the womb. So this now you have the red vision, the mind of red increase. It's like the clear red sky just before dawn, or like a copper red reflection in the sky. And the seventh one, so now the red and white bodhicitta meet at the heart chakra in the indestructible drop in the central channel. And it's got like, it's like a tiny seed. The top part is, one part is red and one part is white. These are physical, but they're sort of subtle physical. You can't see them with your eyes. The medical profession doesn't discuss these. So now you experience the dark vision, the mind of dark appearance. It's as if you've fallen into darkness, or it's like a dark and empty sky, or being in a dark room. At the beginning of this vision, you have some awareness and recognize an appearance of darkness, and then you become unconscious. This, of course, is talking about the great yogis who are subtly conscious at this level, you know, and you can practice this in their meditation. So now the gross consciousness has ceased, your subtle consciousness, and now all that's left is your extremely subtle consciousness. And this is now the 8th stage, the clear light vision. This is the subtlest level of mind, occurring only after all the grosser consciousnesses have ceased. It's like an autumn dawn when the sky is so clear, no clouds, no dust. It's not bright like at noon, not red and not dark. Nothing else appears. So the yogis continue to meditate at this point and can stay as long as they like. We'll discuss all this later. And again, for ordinary people who have no awareness of what is happening, it could be 3 days before your mind leaves your body. So this occurs for everybody, quickly or slowly, whatever, animals as well. Animals and humans, most animals and humans. And because it's the way we're physically constructed, you know. So death occurs when the indestructible drop splits open and the extremely subtle mind and wind, which are linked together, leave your heart chakra. And depending on which rebirth you take, they exit the gross body at one point or other. It will be if you'll be reborn in a pure land, or as or of a Buddha, or the formless realm, it's a certain kind of subtle type of form of meditative, whatever is posited by the Hindus. Your mind leaves from the crown. If you'll be reborn as a human being, your mind leaves through the eyes. If as a hell being, it leaves through the anus. As an animal, it leaves through the sex organ. As a hungry ghost, from the mouth. And it can leave from other places as well. So, okay. Signs of death. When the mind leaves the body of a man, the white bodhicitta continues down the central channel and leaves through the sex organ, and the red continues up and leaves through the nostrils. And in a woman, it's the opposite. This is a sign the mind has left the body. There are other signs as well. So it's hard to see this because, you know, it can be other stuff like liquid coming out, or could be something coming out of the sex organ. It's hard to see it, but it is said to be a sign, you know. The others, for example, the heat in the body. If everything else is cold, but there's still warmth at the heart chakra, then the mind is still there. Now, I know with my sister, I just sat with her as long as I could. I wasn't allowed to sit for more than a few hours. So I noticed that the heat in her core was still there. And that makes sense, you know, right in her gut, all around there was still warmth. So, of course, that does take time to leave. So I couldn't tell before I had to leave. I couldn't tell if her mind was still there. Because the mind can go immediately, especially if it's a violent death. The mind can leave the body straight away. For most people, it can stay for up to 3 days. But I mean, by the time the heat is gone from the body, let's say 24 hours later, when the core would be cold, if the mind is there, you will still feel warmth at the heart chakra. And as long as the mind is there, there'll be warmth at the heart chakra. So many yogis can stay in this place, conscious at the very subtle level, meditating for hours, days, even weeks and months. There's many examples of that. Lama Yeshe, for example, he died in a hospital in Los Angeles in 1983. And the hospital were very kind and gave Lama Zopa permission to keep Lama Yeshe after he, stopped breathing. They put him on one of those stretchers and kept him in a room all day. And then they had to move his body. So they drove him very carefully, took hours and hours to drive him to Vajrapani Institute, going up north in Northern California. And then his body was kept at Vajrapani Institute for there were all these funeral things, and I know I went, and it was there for 5 days, at least 5 days, while we did all these practices. It was sitting in a coffin. His body was in a coffin in the room next to the Gompa at Vajrapani Institute. I used to live there. It was my bedroom when I lived there. When I first came to America in 94, not very first, when I worked for the centers in 94 at Vajrapani. So anyway, I know that when they got Lama to prepare him for this very special, they do this very special fire puja. So there were a couple of hundred of people there from all around the world. We had to carry his body up the hill and put him into this special place where there was this big fire puja for hours and hours. And the monks who prepared his body to put him in a chair and to put him in special clothes, he'd been lying there in the coffin for 5 days, and he'd spent another day in the hospital. His body was still flexible because his mind was still there. In other words, he'd been meditating for 5 days, 6 days in his body. This is a not uncommon experience for the yogis, Yeah. So now, when the mind does leave the body of an ordinary person, so this is now what happens. The moment the indestructible drop splits open, your very subtle consciousness leaves from the heart chakra and then becomes it leaves the heart chakra, from the heart chakra, and depending on how it leaves the body, but it leaves from the heart chakra, and then depending on whether it's the mouth or the eyes or whatever, and then then immediately from that second, you're finished now, and you now become this intermediate state being. So what happens is basically these 8 stages, they reverse, and you go through the reverse 8 stages, and and that's what happens every time you wake up from sleep. When you go to sleep, you go through those 8 stages, and then when you wake up, your consciousness gradually comes back into consciousness, and you reverse through those 8 stages. So this is what happens at death, except you don't come back and wake up in the same body. You basically go into the intermediate state, go through these 8 stages, and that's like a dream state. It's exactly the same experience. And depending on your future rebirth, so if you're going to have a suffering rebirth, the intermediate state will be very, very terrifying, like very terrifying dreams, If you're going to have a good rebirth, your intermediate state experience is like very joyful, very blissful, very light. And they say that can last up to 7 weeks, like counting human time, Basically, you're kind of waiting there for your new mother and father to come along, for your human body. And it could last, you could be in the intermediate state for a day, for a second, or up to 7 weeks. But they say it never lasts longer than 7 weeks. So there's never longer than 7 weeks before you get a rebirth. That's what they say. So, of course, the types of rebirth possible, human or pure land, if it's a virtuous karmic seed that was triggered, or animal birth, or spirit birth, or hell being birth, if it's a negative rebirth, that's what they say. One of the rebirths as a result of virtue would be a God realm, which is very similar to what the Hindus, the Christians call heaven, and the Muslims call paradise. It's a subtle state of being, and for the Christians, it's the end result. That's heaven. But for the Buddha, it's not the end result. It's still in samsara. You're still in samsara, and it can last a long, long time. And it's the literal fruit of virtue. But it's not a very useful rebirth. You can't practice Dharma because you're so blissed out. It's so joyful. So you want to be reborn as a human, or indeed Amitabha as Pure Land, because then you can at least practice. You know, there might be so much joy in a human birth, but you've got more opportunities because you can use your intelligence. So the second your mind leaves the heart chakra and you now become an intermediate state being, you can see, Lama Zopa says, you can see the world you just left, you can see your relatives, you can see your dead body, but because the karma has finished, you do not recognize any of it and you have no desire to go back. That's what they say. That's what Rinpoche says. I hear many different things about this. You know. So then now you go through the 8 stages in reverse, like I said. So then when your time has come, so let's just think of ourselves in the intermediate state in the past life. At the time of our stopping breathing, it's obvious that a virtuous karmic seed, one of our own past virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing, would have been triggered, because when our mind left the body, and then when we left the intermediate state, we got a human rebirth, and that was already organized before we even left the body, because one of our virtuous karmic seed was triggered. We organized that. So when we died in the past life, we went to the intermediate state, and then when our new mummy and daddy kind of joined together and the egg and sperm came together, assuming it was an old-fashioned way, meaning mother and father having sex, then our consciousness would have left the intermediate state. The karma would have ripened between the new mummy and daddy and us. We ran, basically our mind ran like a magnet, powerfully driven by attachment energy to join that new egg and sperm. But they say here, and Lama Zopa says, this is very shocking to us, that your mind, so that he says, but if rebirth is a human, if from the intermediate state you will take rebirth as a human, you will see your future parents in sexual union. If you're going to be born as a male, you'll be attracted to the mother and you'll have aversion to the father. And if as a female, you'll be attracted to the father and have aversion for the mother. Because of the habit, the karmic imprint of attachment to sexual union. And if you think about it, this is the basis of the animal and human births, isn't it? The most intense attachment we have is one of sexual union. I mean, we created all this, you know, no one made it do this. So the habit is so powerful. And because we're living in a desire realm, this entire human realm we live in, and the animal one, it's driven by attachment. It's created by our attachment for countless eons. And so it's one of the most compelling energies in us. Attachment. So this time of death, when you're going to your new rebirth, you're driven by intense attachment. In my case, as a girl to my father. In your case, as a boy to your mother. They say like this, you know. And then when you get there, like in a millisecond, you're pissed off because all you see is the sex organs. You get annoyed, you get angry, and then that causes you to stop being the intermediate state being, and then you join the egg and sperm. I mean, that's how you get born. It's nothing special. It's nothing delicious. It's nothing holy. It's not a gift from God. It's the result of attachment. So it's very fascinating, isn't it? So now you can ask me some questions, because I've got 15 minutes left today.
Yes, please raise your virtual hand or write the question in the chat. Andrea has one for you.
Yes, talk to me.
Thank you. My question is, Lama Yeshe died in 84, but Lama Öze has been born in 85.
Yeah, that's right, sorry.
Later. Yes, but how can it be 49 days in the Bardo? How can it be then? I don't understand.
Yes, because when it's holy beings, it's different. They're in control of the process, and they can spend months in a subtle state of meditation. They can be in a pure land. They can do what they like. It's not the same for them. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
That's the answer. Yeah. Okay, people, any questions?
There's 2 questions in the chat. The first being,
good. Yes.
How do we tell Western materialists to look forward to anything when they're most likely going to the lower realms?
You can't. You can't. I mean, it's not possible. If I don't have faith in God, you can't tell me to have faith, to look forward to God. If I don't have faith in rebirth, you can't tell me to do that. So the best we can do, we have to know. This is why when you're helping people, you have to know their mind well, what works for their mind. And given that your job is to make them feel relaxed and happy and virtuous, then you find different means to do that. And one of the main ones is to be loving and kind, to make them feel secure, but to praise people. I think to praise somebody, to what a good life you've had, how kind you've been, what an amazing mother, what an amazing father, what a good life you've had. Get them to sort of, don't tell them rejoice in your good qualities, but tell them their good qualities, lift their heart, make them relaxed, make them, I mean, some people who are materialists also have, who aren't much attached, don't have much attached, and accepting impermanence, you know. So find any method to help their mind be happy and virtuous. That's the thing. You have to know the person's mind well to know how to help them.
Thank you. And from the same person, if you're a gay boy, do you want to have sex with your mother or father?
Well, that's the thing that I find. I mean, they don't answer all that, you know. You just got to think about it. We've got to try. It's hard to understand this, because now we can see with, I mean, you know, now we can see that it's so common that humans are born feeling, for example, feeling like a girl, but having a boy's body. Then there are people who feel like a boy and have a girl's body. Then there are people who have got a boy's body but are attracted, but feel like a girl and want to have sex with a male body. So it's really, I mean, and we've created all this we've created all these tendencies in us. We're not made by anybody like this. It's not mother's fault or daddy's fault or God's fault. It's somehow due to our own karma that we're born in these different ways. So I wouldn't really know the answer. We just have to think about that, you know. Then we have to think about it. Just try to understand attachment, not get some fixed answer very easily. But it's all, everything is attachment. So if I'm born, you know, whether I'm attached to more handbags or attached to money or attached to a different, my breast being a different shape, or attached to wanting a penis if I've got a vagina, in the end, it's not criticizing anybody. Join the human race. We're all attached to something. And the more sometimes we can see this, the more we can't get what we're attached to, that's the source of our pain, you know? So if we can get what our attachment wants pretty quickly, it's kind of temporary, but sometimes we can never be satisfied. I mean, some people, you know, no matter what it is, and it's not a moralistic issue. You want to be a boy instead of a girl, all these things that we're talking about now, you know, it's just attachment. We suffer because of yearning for something we haven't got. It's not being critical. It's not judging. It's just having a way to understand why it is, you know. So it's really hard to know whether you're born as a gay boy, whether you're attracted to your mother or father. I just wouldn't know. We've got to think about it. We've got to think of try and hear the logic of it. That's all I can suggest, you know. Yes, Jeffifa. Yes, sweetheart.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you. I have animals that I find who have died, and they're often a violent death. So besides whispering mantras, I actually wanted to ask about my karma. Does this indicate that I might purify something, that, you know, this hawk crashed into our car and died, or a rabbit got hit by the side of the road, or I found a deer shot in the woods? I mean, Well, no, first of all, just finding a deer shot in the woods has got nothing to do with you. But I mean, a bird smashing into your windscreen, you're part of the catalyst for that bird's death. But it doesn't mean there's no volition there. But obviously there's a karmic connection between you and that bird. And the fact that you just merely found that deer, there's a karmic connection there. Of course there is, yeah. Okay. And I mean, you make it purification by yourself helping them. I mean, that's very powerful. You know, every time you help another being at the time of death or anybody, it's purification for you. There's no question. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Terry. Talk to me, darling.
Hello.
Yes.
If somebody makes the donors them organ after the death, does the body leave the organ have two different souls in the body?
No,
and
I
in
understand.
the mind?
Good point. No, it doesn't, darling. It doesn't, Terry. There's consciousness. So let's say, you know, you decide to give your heart to somebody. When your consciousness leaves your body at death, that heart is just a piece of flesh. There's no consciousness in that heart. It will then, let's say I get your heart. Your consciousness is not in my body. The heart that was in your body will now be in my body. But you could say there's a very strong karmic connection between us, that your heart was given to me. That's really powerful. And I mean, incidentally, I've heard many people say that they have a very strong feeling for the person whose organ that they have got. And my feeling is not because the consciousness is in the heart, but because obviously there's a strong karmic connection. I mean, you and I must have a very powerful karmic connection. When out of the blue, you die in one part of the world and I get your heart and we've never met, but we must have met in past lives and have a very strong karmic connection because, you know, you're the cause of me having a life. So that I think that's why we would feel the presence sometimes of that person. But there's no split in consciousness, not like that, darling. Not at all. Okay? Okay, good. Yes, Andrea.
Thank you, Venerable. My next question is about when the body is getting colder. And it is said we shouldn't touch the body because it can cause the consciousness leaves the body, no? And how do
it's best to leave the body without touching it, because then that can disturb the mind of the person if they haven't left their body yet. Yes.
But then how can you see where it is cold and not cold, for example?
Well, I mean, you can be gentle. You be gentle. You can be gentle, you know. That's all. You be gentle. It's not as if there's a law that says you shouldn't touch the body. It means, I mean, normally, you know, you move the body, you throw it in a thing, you chuck it in the back of something. That kind of violent movement can be very distressing. So if you're going to touch the body to check up, then you do it very gently, and even like, you know, for example, one of the options, we're going to discuss this, one of the options, if let's say, you know, in the chapter in Rinpoche's, the section in what to do if your loved one dies at home, what to do if your loved one dies in hospital, what to do if your loved one dies suddenly, he gives different pieces of advice. And so obviously in a hospital, you don't have the luxury of 3 days to keep the body there. So you have to but Lama Zopa says, even if you've got 30 minutes to do prayers, and then one of your options could be to have the hospital put the body in the fridge, and then you would ask. This is what happened recently with a friend of mine in New York. They asked the people at the mortuary to put the body in the fridge for 3 days undisturbed, because then you could do prayers and things and wait till the mind has left. But so then you always ask the people to move the body very gently. That's possible. Do you understand, darling? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Yes. What else, people?
Alona has a question.
Yes.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teachings.
Yes, Alona. Yes.
I have a question about ignorance.
Ignorance, the root delusion called ignorance.
Yeah.
The root delusion called ignorance.
Yes. Delusion called ignorance.
Yeah.
Did we always have that? Did our mind always had this delusion?
As opposed to what option? What will be the option?
As opposed to we didn't have that before, and we acquired.
Okay, so if there's no ignorance, okay. So if there's no ignorance in the mind, and your mind had existed before that, then where did the ignorance come from? If it came into your mind at some point, what would have been the cause of the ignorance? Come in, the door's open. What would have been the cause of that ignorance? If it wasn't there already, what would cause it to come into your body?
I don't know, misunderstanding of something? I don't know.
I'm trying to get you to understand that the ignorance, if it's there, it's been there since beginningless time. If your mind is existing, if your mind is existing without ignorance, that means you're already enlightened. You're practically, you realized emptiness. So how could you if you realized emptiness already and there's no ignorance there, how can ignorance come? So how could it start, in other words? How could ignorance start? What's the cause of it?
Well, it's that it's no cause of it if I'm following your logic.
What?
It's no cause of it if I follow that logic.
Well, that's the logic I'm trying to get you to follow. So the mind can't be a point at which ignorance was never in your mind. It's not possible. If there's anger in your mind now, you will never find a moment of time when there wasn't anger in your mind since beginningless time. So in other words, there can't be a first moment. There can't be creation. There can't come from someone else. That's why the Buddha's logic is that mind is beginningless. And whatever's in your mind now has necessarily been there since beginningless time. But that doesn't mean you can't finish them. That's the point.
I understand. It's the big concept to grasp. I'm working on it.
Yes, exactly. Now, the reason it's a big concept to grasp is because we have an assumption that there's a first moment. When did anger begin? When did love begin? When did the world begin? When did I begin? When did happiness begin? And that view, that assumption is a view of no cause and effect, which is meaningless.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good. Well, that's a good question to answer on. It's a good answer, a good question to end on. Just 1 hour today. We're going to have one more class, but I really feel quite sure we're going to need more classes.
Yes, and I
So
will mail you.
So we just continue the Thursdays. I can tell you what I can do. I mean, I'm thinking maybe we should just do regular Thursdays, like a couple of Thursdays a month on any topic you like. Should we organize that, Lars? Is that helpful?
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it might change a bit because I'll be in Australia at different times. We can work it out, but let's just kind of decide we'll have a couple of Thursdays a month and we can work out
Wonderful.
different topics. So we'll have February the 3rd for this topic. We'll have February the 3rd.
February the 3rd.
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar, darling.
No, the February the 2nd.
Yeah, February the 2nd is Thursday, and then we can have February the 9th. Okay,
Yes.
we can finish death, and then we can think of March the 2nd and the 9th, and then we can think of April the 6th and the 13th, like that, and we can have different topics. We'll have ongoing discussions, okay?
Yes, could you repeat the March?
No, well, you can. Look at your calendar.
Yeah,
first
yeah,
two-
I was there. I
The
just
first
lost.
2 Thursdays. Okay.
Yeah, could it be March 23rd? Would that be okay?
Oh, you mean you've got things booked up already?
Yeah, we got the Jumper Shannon coming in 9th. and
Okay, well, you're going to have to email me then.
yeah, okay. I will email you. Thank you, Venerable. Thank you.
Okay, darlings. Goodbye, everybody. Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche. Make panam ke guchi ke panyam pa me panyang gong ne gondu pa bashog gewa di nudu dag lama sange drubyo ne drawa chikyang malu pa de sala gopashog. What we just said was may compassion bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. And the second one was may all these seeds be planted just by listening. They don't go astray. They can't. May we nourish the seeds with our practice, with our effort from this moment forward, so that these seeds do ripen in our Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes, so that we can be a benefit to sentient beings. Okay. Thank you, precious people. And I'm, again, apologize for the mess up of everything, okay? But
Thank you,
we'll
Venerable.
carry on.